Locked On NHL is starting a new thing where they're going to do the top 100 players in the NHL right now. So we're going to bring that in-house a little bit and continue our summer of lists with the top 5 current Pittsburgh Penguins.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me across all social media platforms at Synonym for Wet. Joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's Twitter account a follow at LO_Penguins. You can also follow us on Instagram now at LockedOn_Penguins. And of course, we appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Don't forget that we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. And if you follow us on YouTube, be sure to hit the notification button. That way you can be among the first to know when we drop our newest episodes. Before we get going, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is right around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets right now. Hunter, unfortunately, it is just you and I on today's episode. No surprise guest. There's not going to be a Taylor Swift reveal on this episode. It's just us two jamokes talking about the top 5 Penguins right now on the current roster. So, as I said in the cold open, we got an email from our bosses at Locked On NHL recently to name 4 or 5 best Penguins right now. This isn't what we've been doing each Friday where we're doing the top 25 of the 2000s, which we will continue that on Friday. So stay tuned for that because we've got a really good list for that. But they're going to, like I said, they're going to start putting together their top 100 current NHLers. As part of that, they asked for our input. So we're going to kind of take you into the process as a listener to this episode. And we're going to go over some of our 4 or 5, we'll go with 5 best Penguins right now. And this doesn't include, like I said, anybody from the past 10 or 15 years. It's right now. It also doesn't include Emperor Penguins or African Penguins or anything like that. So let's jump into it and let's just get the obvious out of the way. The best Penguin right now is very obviously the captain, number 87, Sidney Crosby. We went over everything he's done, what he's been doing, what we expect of him recently, but no surprise there, right, Hunter? The best Penguin right now is number 87, Sidney Crosby.
Pat, if someone doesn't have Sidney Crosby in that top spot, that is not a show or a person worth listening to or anything like that. It's Sidney Crosby. It's not even close. 3 straight 90-plus point seasons despite being in his mid to late 30s. He's now 38. I think he's potentially going to have another 90-plus point season this year. One of the best players of all time, and even though he's 38 right now, he is still the best player on this team. We're not going to rage bait anyone here or anything like that. That's ridiculous.
No, for sure. And before we keep it going here, because we already did last week to celebrate Sid's birthday, we went over everything with Crosby. We don't need to spend a lot more time on it. If you're here, you know. He's arguably one of the best players still in the league and definitely on the Penguins. But the funny thing about the current moment that we're in for the Pittsburgh Penguins is there's a very clear dividing line of like, these are the good players. These are the not so good players. If this was even 5-6 years ago, this would have been a really kind of difficult exercise just on the sole fact that there was a lot of talent on the Penguins. And the top 5 Penguins, it was basically Crosby, Malkin, Letang. And if you're going to do 4 or 5, depending on the day, depending on the time of the season, depending on who was hot and who wasn't, been really hard. It would have been really hard to fill out numbers 4 and 5. So instead of wasting any time here and just getting into the really obvious ones, Hunter, I know you have one to put in the top 5 that might surprise people. So Go ahead and hit us with that one.
I don't think this should really surprise anyone. I have Erik Karlsson in my top 5. Honestly, Pat, if you want a really hot take, I would very much consider putting him at number 2 on this list by talent alone. This past season, again, in terms of 5-on-5 points among all defensemen in the league, he was tied for 5th with Evan Bouchard and Lane Hudson. I know, people. He's not good defensively. He has not been good defensively for a long time. But when he is on, it's breathtaking to watch him coming out of the defensive zone with control, running things offensively from the point. And yeah, I know he hasn't been as consistent as we have wanted him to be with the Penguins. But in terms of talent, Erik Karlsson, to me, needs to be on this list, and he needs to be very high on this list.
I don't disagree in principle. I think if you look at the Penguins roster on Wednesday, August 13th, as we record this, there's no question he's in the top 5 best players on the team right now. I struggle with it a little bit, though, for a couple of reasons. One, again, just to make sure it's out there, not disagreeing with you, he's in the top 5. It's like I said earlier this week. I do think Erik Karlsson has been a victim of unrealistic expectations. He was never going to be a 100-point defenseman on the Pittsburgh Penguins for multiple reasons. One, you look at the San Jose teams he was on, they were just like, Erik, go do whatever you want to do. Like, we don't care. Just go. And that's what he did. You come to the Penguins, he was going to be another piece of the puzzle. He wasn't going to be the guy that they put the saddle on and depended upon him to do everything. He had more help. So by virtue of that fact, his point share was going to go down. How much was the question? The other thing is, what I think I struggle with him is with another player we're going to talk about later on in the show, is that he's just been inconsistent isn't the right word, but there have been stretches where he's been really good. There's been stretches where you watch his game for a week or 2 weeks and you go, yeah, that's the guy they went and got. And then you have a week or 2 weeks where you go, he's not a liability, but he's also not contributing everything you would want him to contribute. So while I agree in principle that, yes, of the Penguins' current roster, it's almost impossible to not put him in the top 5. But it sucks because, again, the unrealistic expectation. You look at Erik Karlsson and you think, oh my God, it's Erik Karlsson. It's not Erik Karlsson of 5 years ago. So it's a really tough one to look at. Another one that we'll touch on real quick, and then we'll kind of debate a little bit in the second segment. You got to go for me with Rickard Rakell after last year. He really bounced back. I said it 2 seasons ago, but it was to discuss his season most recently. I think between the injuries, not being able to get a consistent game going 2 years ago, made it a blip on the radar, and he proved that absolutely this past year. Had a really, really good season. He plays 81 games, 35 goals, 70 points. Really looked like the Rickard Rakell that he was when he was first acquired by the Penguins a couple of years ago.
100%. He's in my top 5. And again, people, we're really only doing this based on talent right now on the Penguins roster. Like, that is literally our criteria for this, just because, again, Locked On NHL, they're doing a top 100 players around all the NHL. They asked all the hosts, give us your top 3 to 5 players on your team. So we wanted to make it local and just talk about the players that we submitted. Again, Sidney Crosby, very obvious. Erik Karlsson, for me, he needs to be on this list somewhere. I would argue him maybe at number 2. If you want to say number 3, number 4, that's fine. But Rickard Rakell, he is also on my list, Pat. I was debating going back and forth, somewhere in between the 3 to 5 range. If I had to pick a number right now, I'd go number 4. So you probably know who the other 2 are going to be based on how they played last year. But Rickard Rakell 100% needs to be on this list. Was absolutely tremendous for the Penguins last year. 35 goals, 70 points, 81 games. Whenever the Penguins needed a big goal, he was right there for it. He had such great chemistry with Sidney Crosby. Hasn't been traded yet, though I don't think he's going to finish that full contract out with the Penguins. Still TBD on whether he gets traded before camp, but he was tremendous last year, and he very much deserves to be on this list. If your top 5 doesn't have Rickard Rakell on it in terms of current Penguins talent-wise, you're doing it wrong.
Right there with you. And if you're like me and not great at math, that's 3 players for a top 5. That means we've still got 2 to go, and we'll discuss who those 2 should be. You probably have a good idea, but you know what? It's a podcast. We're going to talk it out. So make sure you're hanging with us in that second segment. We'll get back to that right after this. But first, we've got to tell you about today's first sponsor, and that is FanDuel. August 26th, is officially FanDuel's Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your shot for MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champion already before week 1, this is your moment. If you're a Pittsburgh fan and you're feeling like a real sicko, you can even put a bet down on Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers winning the AFC North crown. So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. We're back here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp, right alongside Hunter Hodes, and let's keep it going here, Hunter. As we said in the opening segment, Locked On NHL is doing their top 100 players in the NHL right now, and as part of that, they've asked us to contribute to it, so we're going to localize it today with our top 5. We've already got Sidney Crosby, Erik Karlsson, and Rickard Rakell. So let's talk it out with this one. I'd say he's on the list for sure. It's just a matter of where. We got to go with the guy who might very well be on his farewell tour this season, and that is number 71, Evgeni Malkin. We have talked about Gino ad nauseum this offseason as well as last season. Really tough year to handicap for Evgeni Malkin, because had the typical Gino kind of year where he gets bumps and bruises here and there, misses some games. And then he also had the other thing that happens to Evgeni Malkin quite a lot, and has happened quite a lot throughout his career, revolving door of line mates. Doesn't have a lot of time to build chemistry or consistency with them. Doesn't have, by Evgeni Malkin standards, a great year. But again, when you look at this Penguins roster on August 13th, 2025, really difficult to say he's not on the top 5 current Penguins.
Yeah, if we were doing, a full ranking, and maybe Pat, you can do your full ranking later on in this segment, and then I can, give mine. I'd have him a bit lower on the list. Not trying to disrespect Gino now. It's just because of where he is age-wise. Obviously, Pat, if this were, 5 to 6 years ago, he'd be right behind Sid, just because, in his prime, he was one of the best players in the world, and he's going to go down, in my opinion, as a top 25 player of all time, especially when you look at his career accomplishments. But still, last year, despite having that revolving door of wingers, you have 16 goals, 50 points in 68 games. He missed 14 games. I will still say this, if he had been a bit more healthy, he gets 60 plus points last season. And you're not seeing as many of the people out there that are like, oh yeah, he's cooked and all that stuff. I think a lot of that is kind of hogwash, especially when you look at the forward group right now. If that does stay the same, he is going to get some fairly good line mates for this year. And I do think if he stays fully healthy, he's going to have a 60 plus point season. In my opinion, he still has at least a little bit left in the tank. Not what he used to be, of course. He's 39 years old, but he still has a little bit left in the tank. When he still has the puck, he's a bully. Like, it's still hard to get the puck off of him once he gets motoring, and especially, Pat, once he comes back from a few games off, he really has his legs. Like, it was like that multiple times last year where he would come back after a small thing and be like, wow, Gino just has his legs. It looks like it's 2016 Gino out there with the way that he was skating. So I don't think they're going to do any load management with him or anything like that, and you try to tell a star player like that we're going to do it, he's just going to tell you to screw off. Like, that's just not how players like him operate. That's not how basically any professional athlete operates. Like, they want to play. Like, that's the bottom line here. But he needs to be in this top 5, still one of the best players on this team. And then after that, Pat, this one's fairly easy for me. It should be for you as well. Bryan Rust has to be on here in some way, shape, or form. If people want to put him at number 2, I can see it. People want to put him a little bit further down. I also understand, but Bryan Rust had an outstanding season last year, 31 goals, 65 points in 71 games, one of the most consistent Penguins throughout his Penguins tenure. TBD on him also potentially not finishing his full contract with the Penguins. He doesn't have the no move clause anymore, so they can trade him to whatever team they want to at this point in time. But those are my top 5 current Penguins pure talent. Sidney Crosby, Erik Karlsson, Bryan Rust, Rickard Rakell, and Evgeni Malkin. That's mine.
Yeah, the thing that I struggle with right now is between Bryan Rust and Kris Letang. And this is what puts Rust on the list for me over Letang, is that we are operating right now in the immediate.
Right.
And if you compare the way they played last year, Bryan Rust finishes ahead of Kris Letang. Kris Letang last year only has 9 goals, 30 points in 74 games. You look at his career and you break down his point totals. Last year was one of the lowest point totals he's had in his career. The only years that he finished lower was 2009, 2010. If you put that in context, he was still working his way into being Kris Letang. He was not Kris Letang yet in 09-10. Had some good moments in the 08 and 09 runs, but he was not the guy. You still had Sergei Gonchar. Letang was still working his way up and becoming a number 1 defenseman. 13-14 season was shortened a little bit by both the lockout and everything else. He only plays 37 games. Then 07-08, again, he is very much not Kris Letang yet. Puts up 17 points. And then cup of coffee in the NHL in 06-07, 7 games, 2 points. So you can't really count that. So this is one of the lower point totals of Kris Letang's career. You add that up along with just the way the eye test went for Kris Letang last year. Seemed like he lost a step, was a little bit more mistake prone than he has been in the past. And I'm of 2 mindsets of that. I think one, unfortunately, I feel like this might be the more likely scenario. He's on the downslope of his career, and he's not going to be the Kris Letang we've come to know and love over the past 15 or so years. On the other, which I think is less likely, is that it was a bit of a blip on the radar. He's in a little bit of a transitional period as his career comes to an end. He's going to have to switch his game up a little bit. He's not able to do some of the things he was able to do in the past. So he's got to be a little bit more, I guess the word is efficient with his game, to where he's got to be a little bit choosier about pinching in, stepping up, when to jump into the play, when to hang back, which when you look at a player like Kris Letang, who, as we have said on this show multiple times, is an incredible athlete, is in incredible shape, I do think that's entirely possible for him to make that adjustment for the last 3-4 years or however much longer he decides to play.
Again, we'll just have to see what the new coaching staff brings to his game to try and maybe fine tune a few things. He obviously can't skate the way that he used to. He can't bring the offense that he used to with the Penguins. I mean, that's why you saw Erik Karlsson kind of really taking the reins, especially at 5-on-5 offensively last season. But can they come up with a couple of changes to, as the word you said, make his game a bit more efficient, but maybe in a little bit of a lesser role so he's not eating 25-30 minutes a night? I was not trying to disrespect Kris Letang by not having him in the top 5. It's just that those 5 players that I mentioned have more talent right now and had better seasons last year than Letang did.
And that's what you can say
right
for Bryan Rust, because you look at his 24-25 season, career high in goals with 31, ties a career high in assists with 34, career high in points at 65, looks to be a seamless fit in the top six, whether it's with Evgeni Malkin or Sidney Crosby. And you wouldn't think that's what would happen for a guy who was 32 into 33 last season. Well, just 32, because by the time he turned 32, the Penguins were very much done and the season was over. But you don't expect that from a guy who, as we've said on the show, has really had to earn everything he has. He wasn't a highly touted prospect when he originally joined the team back in 15-16. He was really slated to be a bottom six player, kill penalties, good two-way forward. And now he's a bona fide top six forward who continues to produce. So I think, to put a bow on this segment, I agree with your top five. I think we have the same top five. It could change going to next year if Kris Letang bounces back, if one of these younger guys decides to step up and have himself a big year, if Artur Shilovs takes a step and becomes a number one goalie in some capacity. So realistically, like I said in the first segment, bit of an odd time to do this for the Pittsburgh Penguins, because very much a dividing line between who are the best players, who aren't the best players. So really just a matter of semantics when you get into it. But that is going to do it for this segment. When we come back, a steady soldier for the Pittsburgh Penguins for years, has called it a career. We'll talk about that when we come back right after this. But before we do that, we've got to tell you about today's second sponsor, and that is Indeed. You just realized your business needs to hire someone yesterday. So how can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy, just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. As I have said, when Indeed's been a sponsor for us, I have not had to use it as someone looking to hire, but I have used it as someone looking for a job, including my current employer. They were able to get me a couple other interviews as well with pretty quick action. So Indeed is an incredible service. So now you can speed up the hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this very podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring Indeed is all you need. All right, we're back here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp, right alongside Hunter Hodes, and I can only think of one word to describe this former Penguin who has hung the skates up and called it a career, and that is Chad Ruhwedel, defenseman. The only word that I can think of to describe Chad Ruhwedel is reliable. Was he one of the best defensemen the Penguins ever employed? No. But when you needed him, when you needed a steady fifth or sixth defenseman on your roster that you could depend on when you needed him, whether it was for injury, whether it was for somebody getting sat down for poor performance, if you just needed someone to come out of the bullpen, take some bottom pairing minutes, not be a liability, it was Chad Ruhwedel.
Wouldn't say a number 5, Pat, more like a number 6, but he was throughout his Penguins tenure, he was a number 7, but he played a good chunk of number 6 minutes for them. Played 6 games in the 2016-17 Stanley Cup playoffs during the Penguins' back-to-back Stanley Cup runs. After that, played several more seasons with them before he moved on to the New York Rangers. Played a few games for them last year, but he spent most of last season with the Hartford Wolfpack, the Rangers AHL farm team, before deciding to call it a career. And for someone that went undrafted, Pat, nearly 400 games, started his career with the Buffalo Sabres before coming to Pittsburgh and then finishing his career with the Rangers, felt like it was fairly solid. I'm not going to make a bigger deal out of it than it should be, but you said it. When the Penguins needed him, he was always there to answer the call for number 6 defensive minutes, could put him on the third pair, reliable in his own zone, didn't give you a lot of offense. That was never part of his game, but he gave you steady play in the defensive zone when he was called upon. So wish him the best of luck in retirement. Was a really good soldier for the Penguins for several seasons.
And like you said, is he going to steal the headlines? Is there going to be a highlight pack for what he did in 2017 for that cup run? No, but we know it. And if you're a fan of a team, whether it's the Penguins or any other who have won the Stanley Cup, you know that rare is it that the 18 players and 2 goalies who start the playoffs are going to play for you for every single game until you lift the cup.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen. It takes a bunch of players. It takes 20 plus skaters. There are going to be guys who play 1, 2, 3, 5 games max in a playoff run, but you're going to need all those bodies. And Chad Ruhwedel was one of those players. It was a no-nonsense bottom pairing defenseman that you could depend upon when you needed him. In a way, he fits that model of defenseman that I always talk about, where was the only difference is he was never going to play like an all 82 game season. Rare was that he was even going to crack like 50 games, but he's the kind of defenseman that when you go back, you look at his numbers, you look at his tape, and you just realize solid and dependable. Doesn't do anything too flashy. Rare is it he is a liability. And like you said, being undrafted and a guy who worked his way up, guy who carved out a solid NHL career, gets to retire with a Stanley Cup ring, got to play for 2 really great franchises in Pittsburgh and New York. A lot to be said for that as a workhorse.
I will say, Pat, it is funny. He only played in 10 total games for the Rangers, so had a little bit of a cup of coffee there. So
hey, that's 10 more games for the New York Rangers than a whole lot of people can say they have played for the New York Rangers.
Hey, that's fair. I just had to joke with you about that because it's like, hey, he only had a little bit of a cup of coffee there, only 10 games. But it's funny. He only had 2 seasons where he played 50 plus games, 21-22, when he was basically the Penguins' number 6 defenseman for that entire season, played 78 games for the Penguins during that year. And then in 23-24, he played 52 total games, 47 with the Penguins, 5 with the Rangers. So for a lot of his career, very reliable number 7 defenseman who could step in when there was an injury or two, or if someone was struggling or something like that. But he also did get his chance later on in his career to be the Penguins' number 6 defenseman during the 21-22 season. The last season the Penguins made the playoffs, by the way. And
I think we know what the missing piece is, why they haven't been able to get back.
Yeah, maybe Chad Ruhwedel was the missing piece after all. But hey, during his prime, you said it. Steady, efficient in his own end, solid number 6, number 7. You know, the fact that he almost got to 400 games, pretty good accomplishment for someone who went undrafted. But as I also said, we don't want to make too big of a deal out of this. I just want to congratulate him on a good career.
So all the best in retirement to number 2, Chad Ruhwedel. And that is going to do it for the Wednesday edition of Locked On Penguins. Hunter and I will be back on Friday. We are going to continue our top 25 of the 2000s because it's just a summer of lists at this point while we wait for training camp. We will also bring back, as we do each Friday, Fan Take Friday. So keep an eye on our socials. We will put a call out for your questions, your hot takes, and everything in between. So be on the lookout for that. And for now, for Hunter Hodes, I'm Patrick Damp. Thank you as always for tuning in. We will be back on Friday.